Hello, day drinkers. I'm Molly Fader, Molly O'Keefe, and you are listening to Day Drinking with Authors, the interview series where I pick a book, the author picks a drink, and we discuss both. And I was just telling our author today, Jennieke Cohen, that I took like a mental health day in the middle of this pandemic. I was sick for a week. We had gotten COVID. I was sick for a while, so I guess I needed one more day lying around. I'm not sure, but I had a bit of a mental health day, and I finished up this book, and what a perfect way to spend the day. So if you have not picked up My Fine Fellow, treat yourself. If you are a fan of historicals, if you're a fan of YA, if you're a fan of retellings, this is a pretty delightful retelling, but and we're going to talk about this. It's really a very nuanced conversation about bigotry and privilege. And she walks a tightrope. She walks a tightrope through the entire book with particularly with one character, and I can't wait to talk to her about it. But I'm going to read the back cover copy because my mom likes that. We're also having a great drink, and I'm realizing that I took a big swig, and it was mostly rum, and I'm feeling that one in my knees. So this one is My Fine Fellow. Culinary delights abound, romance lingers in the air, and plans go terribly, wonderfully astray in this gender-bent take on My Fair Lady from Jennieke Cohen, author of Dangerous Alliance. Perfect for fans of Bridgerton or Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. It's 1830s England, and culinarians, doyens who consult with society's elite to create gorgeous food and confections, are the creme de la creme of high society. Helena Higgins, top of her class at the Royal Academy, has a sharp demeanor and an even sharper palate, and no stardom awaits for her if she can produce greatness in her final year. Penelope Pickering is going to prove the value of non-European cuisine to all of England. Her contemporaries may scorn her Filipina heritage and her dishes, but with her flawless social graces and culinary talents, Penelope is set to prove them wrong. Elijah Little has nothing to his name but a truly excellent instinct for flavors. London merchants won't allow a Jewish boy to own a shop, so he hawks his pasties for a shilling a piece to passers-by. But he knows with training he can break into the highest echelon of society. When Penelope and Helena meet Elijah, a golden opportunity arises to pull off a project never seen before and turn Elijah from a street vendor to a gentleman chef. But Elijah's transformation will have a greater impact on this trio than they originally realized, and mayhem, unseemly faux pas, and a little romance will be at this part of this delicious recipe. I messed up the end of that. Let's bring in Jennieke.
Hello. Hi.
It's funny when I read the back cover copy, I start to get really in my head, like I'm in, seventh grade again, and it's my turn to read.
Gosh, I used to hate that because you always stumble over a word or something, and you're like, "Oh, everyone's listening to me." But I guess it continues as an adult.
Yeah. I read there was like a meme that came up on Twitter that there should be a hotline that you call for people who, you've never pronounced a word, you've only read a word, for people who are big readers. So you go to the hotline and you're like, is it folks pock? Like, oh no.
Right.
But as a person, and this is funny because it kind of ties into the book, as a person who so much of my early education on history came through historical romances, I was reading this book and I was like, did I just culinarians? Did I miss a whole? Right. But then your authors, and I was like, no, you made it up. What a relief.
No, that's so funny. I know so many people who get their history from historical romances because, like, if you read a lot of them, you get in that zone where you're like, oh, this is so accurate. And like, everyone has their own degree of how accurate they're going to be. But yeah, no, and this one is like, I wanted to be clear, although I don't, maybe it's not super clear up front, but I was trying to be as clear as possible that this was alternate history. So,
well, it was funny too, because it gave me that taste almost of like and I mean, all of this with absolute respect and adoration for the book, but almost like a Harry Potter thing, where I was like, oh, I don't know about this thing, and I'm like, schools for culinarians. But before we get into the book, you picked a delicious drink.
I had never had this before. Yes, it's actually, I think it is quite tasty, right? Like, I think we were both talking before, we never had like rum cocktail with Earl Grey rum cocktail, and I like it.
I do
I
too.
do.
I've had a lot of Earl Grey martini. I mean, not a lot, not a
Yeah.
lot. but this is like the rum makes it sweeter and kind of warmer. It's really delicious. So thanks for
Yeah.
bringing it into my life.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad. Glad I could do that. I did spiced rum because that's all I had, and it's even, it's got a nice little spicy kick there, I guess you call it. But it was funny because a memory came up on my Google Photos today, and it was showing me the last time I was in England, which was 5 years ago, and it showed a picture of a cocktail, and I was like, what was that? And then I remembered it was an Earl Grey cocktail at a gastro pub in London, in the same vicinity, like the same part of town where, where Helena and Penelope are living, where where most of the book takes place. And so I was like, wow, what an odd thing to come up today. So yeah.
Full circle for
I
you
guess
today.
so.
So I have to say, and we've got a lot to talk about. This book is a gender swapped retelling of My Fair Lady, which we'll talk about. It is a alternate historical timeline. Charlotte survives childhood. We will talk about that. It's kind of food TV meets YA.
Yes.
And we'll certainly talk about that. But it is a very nuanced conversation about bigotry and privilege. And I wanted to ask you, was that your intention going in? You're like, I'm going to put all of this stuff around it, but the story that I'm telling is about privilege and bigotry.
I think so. I'm trying to think back because the original idea was not that. The original idea was the My Fair Lady retelling and the gender swap. Yeah, the fun stuff. That was the original stuff. And then as I was writing it, after I had sort of in the process of after like selling the proposal to my publisher and then, putting the rest of the book together, I decided, because there was a bit of a gap there, and I decided like, I really think I want to handle anti-Semitism, and I wanted Elijah to be Jewish because it's like, this is something I've dealt with in my own life, and I don't see why I shouldn't put it in a book. And beyond that, and then Penelope also, like, I decided to make her half Filipino like I am, and so yeah, there was sort of, can I do this? That's where it came. It started like, can I do this? Can I do it well? And then, do I take the chance and try it? And, I think, like you said, like I felt like I was walking a tightrope between the fun stuff and the difficult stuff.
So when you sold, did you sell on proposal, or had you written the whole book? And so
sold on proposal.
Okay. Yeah. So it wasn't a complete, those characters that you bought, I'm going to just going to do real quick.
No, well, so yeah, I didn't have the Jewish elements and the Filipino elements in the proposal. It was like he was going to have some other backstory that made his life difficult. It wasn't going to be this stuff. So they bought it that way, and then when to their credit, when they read the final manuscript, they were on board.
Wait a second. So you have this huge shift in your story, and you don't like, hey editor, gonna run this by you. You wrote the whole book and sent it in, not knowing what they would say, or did you have a relationship with your editor? Like, tell me all about it.
I do have a relationship with my editor, and honestly, I'm trying to remember back. I think. Okay, so what happened? I did tell her I was going to change Elijah's backstory, and make him Jewish. And that's, I sort of left it at that. And then, and she was fine with it. And then,
it plays into it's funny that would have come secondary, because it's such a seamless part of the story. He is a guy who's selling the food he makes at the night market. He did sell fruit and vegetables on the roads outside of town, and he cannot, because he's Jewish, the merchants, you have to sign a agreement that you're Christian.
Right. Yeah. So you had to sign some kind of agreement. You're right. And basically saying that you believed in the tenets of Christianity to own a shop in the city of London, and that's how the London merchants like kept outsiders out, which was crazy. I thought when I found that in my research, and because actually I was researching as I was writing because of my deadline, and so
sorry, that's funny when you're a writer.
No,
my hair was on fire, and I was
not my choice to do that, but I had to. And then, and so that was something like, honestly, like I had thought, because I had started off with the template of My Fair Lady, in My Fair Lady, Eliza Doolittle wants to own a flower shop. And so it was sort of like, okay, Elijah's going to want to own a pasty and pie shop. And then as I was researching and writing at the same time, I found that little tidbit that the London merchants kept Jews out, and that there was all these workarounds that some people did, but that they were not easy, and you had to have connection and stuff.
And it required them denying a huge part of their identity and their culture and heritage in
Absolutely.
A lot of cases, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people had to like just completely pretend, or they would get somebody else to act like they were the owner of the business, and that and then they had to have some like underhand agreement, under the table agreements with these people, and hope that they didn't mess it up for them later on. Yeah,
I gotta say, one of the things that really, it's always, I think anytime you're reading historical fiction, and as someone who got most of their historical information from romance novels, when you come face to face with really how violent and racist and misogynistic that it really was, it can be kind of shocking. The note in your, I'm not sure if it was in the text of the novel or if it was in your author's note about in Spain, the dialect in Spain started to change as a way to target Jewish people, so that it became more pork focused, and people who wouldn't eat pork, they were like, well, you're Jewish, to the Inquisition you go. Like,
yes. I know, that's mind blowing. When I found that out too, I knew that before I started writing the book, but like, I thought that was just mind blowing. That, all the interesting pork dishes that come out of Spain are as a result of,
as a traveler who jokes about it, that you're like, geez, Louise, it is shocking. But to make it more about the writing, let's talk about your writing. Talk about a tightrope. So the character Helena is the Higgins of the My Fair Lady retelling, right? So she is going to recreate Elijah Little into this culinarian.
Yes.
But what a tightrope with her, because she is a bigot, and she is also a white savior, and there's a lot of really tricky things put in her. But you love her for and she's saying these things, and you're like, oh, but you understand it. Like, you really wrote that. Had to be so tricky, and I would like to know how it was writing her, and then how it was editing her.
Okay, yeah. So writing her initially was, before I realized I was going to have her, have all these kind of, beats like say racist and anti-Semitic things later on in the book. Spoiler alert. Yeah, no, she wasn't. I wouldn't say she was a delight, but it was fun to write a character that was like so oblivious, I guess. Yeah. And but then, as the book as I kept writing the book, I got less and less interested in her point of view, because it was just really hard to like, put myself in her shoes. And although I know many people like that, and I've known people like that my whole life, it's just, and since we were in the middle of the beginning of the pandemic, I really was like, oh my gosh, like these types of people kept popping up in the news and in other, places. And so my point is, like, at the beginning, it was difficult to get into her mind space. And I think I veered away from her in the first draft. And then in subsequent drafts, I had to go back in and kind of like try and get deeper into her brain, find the more sympathetic parts of her, and you know, just like make it clear that she was a nuanced person, and yet like also make it clear that she does a lot of things that are just not acceptable.
I mean, you know, I feel like you described so many people that all of us know, right? The person who's like, I'm not racist. I have, my best friend is a Filipina, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However, I deny her heritage at every chance. You know, like there is a huge swath of white society that is her, and I don't know. I found her really upsetting,
Yeah.
and I found her redemption, you know, all believable and heartbreaking. Her growth was really good, but man, what a tightrope. I mean, good job.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Because it felt like that. And honestly, like you know, I don't know that I would continue to be friends with her, as you know, but I'm not my characters. So it's an interesting distinction, I think.
Yeah. And I also really thought there was so much there about how people who appreciate a certain level of freedom, despite the society that's saying you shouldn't, you know, she is a woman living in this world and she appreciates a certain amount of freedom and can't see how she is suppressing the freedom or livelihoods or, you know, happiness of other people. And again, I just feel like, man, we know so many of those people. You really, not an easy job. And so how was writing Elijah compared to that? Who had to battle this, like, and also like this kind of male ego and enough already, and what's with these ladies and
Yeah, no, that was fun. I think he I was trying to find the balance where he was like standing up for himself in a way that you felt like a man or a young guy would do, and yet also like he also wanted to better himself, and he knew this was the only way to do it. So there was that issue. Finding that balance there was tough. It was a little tough, but like I think I got there in the end. And then I really love, you know, like the scenes between him and Penelope. I think those were kind of the most fun. And you know, I think, you know,
the
romance people. So
yeah, the romance at the end where it's all like, oh my God, just say it. And you know, when you read a full romance and it's like, oh my God, just say it. You know, how ineffective that could be. But there's something, these are young people in a really tight constraint, you know, oh, it was delicious. Just say it. Yeah, I loved it. So let's talk about the alternate history of this. So you explain the reign of Charlotte, what you've done.
Okay. So yes, in our timeline, you know, George IV's daughter was Princess Charlotte, and she died in 1817 in childbirth, and her child died as well, very tragically, and the entire kingdom was completely broken up about it, you know, Britain. And they, anyway, I have a lot of this in the historical note, but so in this timeline that I've created, Charlotte lives and her child also lives, and they have this reign where, you know, she is very much a champion of women, insofar as one could be in the 1820s and 30s, I think. And like, but so like that's what sort of is very different about this world, is that women have professions, and then the biggest and best profession are culinarians, and the royal family is super into having culinarians around them, and they use them as diplomats, and they use the food as a way to bring other countries into Britain, and they're not as into colonization as the Victorians were.
Slavery and
yeah. I wanted to get rid of that.
They can worry about food. But you also, so they could go to this culinary institute, but you have two other like professions where women have thrived and sort of dominate these professions.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go into that.
They're
Yes,
so
okay.
great. They're so great.
I know. I kind of wish I had been able to devote more time to the other professions, honestly, because I thought they were kind of fun. So one of them is croaqua, which is they play croquet. These are like professional women athletes who play croquet in huge fountains in stately homes around England, and they're like they've retrofitted these huge fountains so they can play croquet under the water, basically, or like they're standing in water. They're not like submerged completely, but so it's sort of like like water polo slash croquet. It's the oddest thing.
And I mean, again, when you're describing this, I was like, if I really miss this whole part? And then I was like, wait a second. I think this might be made up.
Yeah. I know. I wish that existed, right?
Water croquet, women dominated water croquet. And then what's the other profession?
The third one was women who, it was supposed to be like an ergonomist for carriages and carriages and other vehicles, where like, so the girls make the most like amazing interiors for these carriages, where there's things popping out of the ground, out of the floor of the carriage. There's tables, there's ice boxes, there's anything you could want. It's like the most advanced car that we have now in a carriage. It was what I was trying to get at.
And then women design them. I have to let my dog in. She's barking. Sorry, excuse me.
Okay.
1 second. Okay, come on. She doesn't know how to open. Like if you have to leave it wide open. She can't like nudge her nose. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to distract you with my dog. So those professions were dreamy, and I've just imagined you like as we all are writers, you're doing something else, but the back of your brain is chugging along, and you're like, underwater croquet. That's what they'll do.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what I was thinking. Because I was trying to come up with professions that, like actual professions that the girls could have gone into, but then I knew that there was always going to be this like pushback from men, and so I thought, well, I should just create some professions for these women. I've already done it with culinarians, so why not?
Was your creation of this little pocket of history, was that the reason why you did it too? Is just like I want a purely, not idealized, but like I want to control some of the rules of this world.
Yeah, that's basically what I was going for. I didn't see a real way to do it where I kept to the original timeline. So, because women at that time, especially upper class women, couldn't have professions. They couldn't do much besides get married and, take over a household. And so I really wanted a world where the girls could,
do these things.
Get to the top of whatever thing they wanted to get to.
So speaking of the culinarians, the research around this food that everybody is making, and Penelope, her family, in an effort to not stifle or damage or create any drama around her existence at this school, has left England. Her mother is from an island in the Philippines. Her husband's an Englishman. Both families didn't like what was going on, and they left, and she meets them and travels around. But and her, like, they all have to do these final projects, and her project is the food of the Americas. Helena's doing this Pygmalion thing. But the talk of the food, and there are these food sort of fairs and competitions. I'm a person who writes about food too, but like that you kept kind of making it dramatic and making it bigger and making it like, that had to be really hard.
It was a little difficult, honestly. Like, I think that's the thing most people won't notice. I was considering this because I was like, I don't think anyone's going to notice that this was like actually kind of difficult to put together these competitions and like, and figure out how to make the food better and better and better. Like that took a lot of time and research. I was, I remember some dishes would take me like a whole day to figure out, like I'd have to figure out the menu for Elijah at let's say at the first culinary fair, and like I was like, it's got to be stuff that can be sitting at room temperature. It's got to be stuff that's, like they don't have a real refrigeration. Even like I didn't want to like completely go crazy and create refrigerators. And then, so yeah, no refrigeration. It's got to like sit out. It's got to be good. It's got to, so it had all these criteria. And then for the next, the next big hurdle, which is the royal competition. And then again, like everything has to get better and better and better.
Escalate.
Yeah. Right.
So
yeah, it was tough.
Did you play with what they were able to get? Like
a little bit. Yeah. So because I changed the world, I figured, and because there's more like trade going between England and like other countries that there wasn't necessarily trade with them in our timeline, I thought, let's get some ingredients that they wouldn't have had necessarily in 1830, but that existed in the world in 1830, just like maybe weren't available in England. So I brought them, I had certain things like chilies from the Americas, from South America, Central America, coming to Britain, and like things like moles, which I don't think very few people would have ever tried at that point there. And so a lot of stuff like in the American continent, obviously I was like, okay, they can get some of it, not all of it. And then like some tropical things. And of course, Britain, was trading, was going to the South Pacific anyway back then, but like, the getting it to England was the big issue. And then, and then I just figured like, if all of Europe is more into food than they were, then also they too would have like been growing some of this stuff that they weren't necessarily growing. And then therefore able to get it to England sooner than getting
some of it is you're like writer's prerogative. Well, yeah,
I was like, okay, I'm considering global supply chain issues in this novel, which is kind of silly, but it existed like, because the global supply chain was so different back then, I thought, okay, well, I have to figure out what can get there on a boat and get there not completely rotten. Yeah. And so it was interesting, but I enjoyed that.
And it's funny, as I was reading it, because you do have to build, like each like dish that you're going to describe has to be meaningful to where the characters are in the timeline, in relationship to each other, in relationship to their pasts, that he makes, basically a latke, at one point, smoked salmon, like, but that it has to keep building. I can only imagine the days where you're just like, fuck it.
Yeah. No, there were days.
Romance, I'm like, and you get to the big "I love you" sex scene. I'm like, does anybody care?
No, you're so right. There were plenty of days like that where I was like, now I have to come up with another thing, another food, another amazing dish, and like it needs this element and that element, and then I had like paper pads full of just like ideas of food ideas, and then like I would kind of like grab here and like see if I could compose a dish that made sense and that would sound really cool and amazing and like and good to eat. And then I was also like doing it. I would go on Pinterest and look at like chefs compositions and stuff of the dishes, and just to like get inspiration that way. And then like I'm in general, I look at a lot of food blogs just for fun. So that was helpful. But there were definitely days where it's like, oh man, who cares what this dish is going to be?
Your next book will have nothing to do with food. So one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was, you went into it planning it was a retelling of My Fair Lady. Mm-hmm. And my question for you is, what draws you to a retelling? Like, what is exciting to you about a retelling? And then as you were writing it, what became like the lamest? Like you were like, oh, why did I do this? So what was exciting?
Well, so I think in general, I like retellings because, and I think people like retellings because you have a familiarity with the story, and maybe you even have some nostalgia for that story. But then in a retelling, you're able to kind of to change it in a way that hopefully people will like. But beyond that, a way that can say something else about your world or say something else about your perceptions or things you're noticing in society. I guess that's like, the academic deep answer, but like the fun stuff is that you get the actual, you get the source material, but you get it in a totally different way. And so I think that's why people read retellings and stuff. That's why I like them.
Yeah.
And
I think
then
they're popular right now too because of the new but the sameness of it. Like we're all, it's like
yeah,
why we're all rewatching Grey's Anatomy and The Office, right? Because we're fragile and we need to know, like, we're like emotionally on the edge.
yeah,
We need to know when the big hits are coming and when it's, like, and I feel like
that's
that's
true.
part of why the retellings are so popular right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a time like now, people want stuff they're kind of familiar with or like have an idea of what it's going to turn out like. And then, yeah, like I think that's totally true. I agree with you. And then, but like difficulty wise, let's see. I think the difficult part is making sure that it's not like so derivative of the original that it's not a new story. At least that's what I wanted to do with mine. And then, because like I enjoy retellings that are pretty close, but also I don't want one for one
Mm-hmm.
because then it's like, why don't I just read the original or watch the original?
I want the link. I want I want to feel smart when I connect the dots.
Yeah,
Rarely, but
right.
yeah, it is.
That's a good
And
point.
that's a hard thing to write. Like, I mean, not to belabor a metaphor, but like how far apart do you put these dots? How close together? Like,
Right.
yeah, that's the tricky part for sure.
Well, like I wanted to keep the stuff that I really loved about My Fair Lady and Pygmalion, and then get rid of the stuff I didn't love. Which specifically like the misogyny of Henry Higgins, and that whole dynamic is pretty toxic.
Like it's kind of. I mean, yes, 100%. And I feel like with your decision to make this sort of about acceptance and bigotry and privilege, her privilege is so toxic, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you manage to keep that part of the story incredibly relevant to right now while also writing in the past and in a totally made up time. Like that's a real dose of magic. I feel like writer magic.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's what I was hoping to pull off. So yay, thank you.
Yay, you did it. And you did it all during a pandemic. This whole book was written during the last.
Yeah, during the beginning.
So how was that?
That was tough.
Pandemic for you.
Gosh, it was really tough. This was my second novel. I've never written a book to a deadline, and so
man, that changes things, doesn't it?
Yeah, and everybody, it really does. Everyone, told me, and I knew so many people's stories about how their second book was the worst book ever to write, and so I had that going in, in my mind, and then everything shut down, and I couldn't do my normal process, which was I used to go to coffee shops. I would absorb the world as I wrote stuff, but that had to go. So I was at home, and I sat outside in my backyard, and as much as the weather would allow, and because it was like I had such a mental block about everything's awful. Why am I doing this? That I had to just step away from the computer and the phone, and I ended up handwriting the majority of this book.
Wow.
Yeah, it was weird, but it worked. Yeah, it was crazy. So, I would go outside, I would have my tea or my drink or whatever it was, and then I would say, okay, here's what I got to write today. And then I would handwrite it. And like, if I didn't get done, I'd just, you know, I would be sad with myself, but then I'd also be like, all right, you know, times are weird.
Yeah, a little forgiveness. I mean, it was really hard. I mean, I find that forgiveness, I went like, there was never a happy medium. I was either infuriated with myself and disappointed, or like, it's okay, Molly. Like, you know,
Right.
go ahead and lay around for a little bit longer, which, you know, we all needed. I am so fascinated by that handwriting process. I feel like that is kind of magical.
I think it was the only way. So like I attempted to dictate some of it into, you know, to my phone or something, like, just because I do tend to get blocked if I'm typing, or I psych myself out, I should say. So I tried dictating it. It wasn't really working. And then, you know, one day I was like, well, why don't you try handwriting it, see if that helps? But because I didn't really have any choices at that point. It was like, that was the sort of the last gasp of
not getting written any other way.
I mean, so it worked.
It is writing on the same device where, you know, I get constant bings of news and, you know, New York Times updates and disaster coming my way 24/7. So
right.
it does, I might take a page from your book and pull out the yellow notebooks and.
Yeah, it's worth trying for sure.
Yeah, especially for sure. So what is next for you? Do you know yet? You're still, this book just released. So
it did. I don't have anything I can talk about yet, unfortunately. But you know, I love historicals, obviously, and I'm also looking at some other genres too. So yeah.
Oh, that's fun. Oh my gosh. Well, you know, I mean, just between you and me, let me know as soon as you know something. I'd love to shout it from the rooftops.
Oh, thank you.
And I really did love this book. Everybody go grab My Fine Fellow. It just came out on Tuesday. It is, when you need a mental health day, it's a good one. It really is. It's really special. It's a careful book. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Even if I was like, you know, have I just completely forgotten about culinary? Thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with me. I really do appreciate it. Everybody out there, stay safe, have a drink, read a book, get the vaccine. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.